here inside of a Quaker 4x4 looking at the auto door. Auto door, conduit running back to the controller, up to the LED bar, conduit running back to the GFI outlet. Nice green light saying everything's on. Conduit running back to outside where I have a junction box with an extension cord. Back to the controller. You can see that currently we're in fiscal week 7. It's Sunday, 2:02 p.m. If I go to the next menu, it tells me that the laying light will go on at 4:30, the door is going to open at 6:27, and the laying light will go off at 7:27 because the sun will be high enough. This menu tells me that the auto door is on, the door setting is fast, and the backlight of the menu is on, saying it's backlit. Next one allows me to set the clock, so I could change the week, I could change the day, I could change the hour, or I could change the minute. Going on to the next menu, this is a daybreak pad, which says I can change or offset from the solar table how much I want it to open after the sun rises or before the sun sets. That all depends on location. If you find your chickens go in early, you want to make sure the door closes early. Okay, daybreak pad, lawn, lamp off hour and on hour. Lamp goes off at 10:30. It goes on at 4:30. I can change that by its off minute, its on minute, and its off hour, and its off minute. Going on to the next menu, this is where you put in your lat and long. We're currently at 40 degrees north, 75 degrees west. That's how it looks up what the sunrise and sunset is. So it again goes through a solar table. It says, oh, what fiscal week are we in? What lat long are we? This is what time the sun rises and sunsets, and the door opens based off of that. One more thing on that menu I just forgot to mention. It also says what time zone we're in, and we're in the Eastern time zone. Again, needs that to look up the solar table. So that's the menu. This is the controller. Going back to the auto door, if I want it to open, there's an override where I can say open, which the door will open based on the override. Or I can say override close. I can also say I want the light on full time, or I can turn the light back off, or the light will go on by the laying light times, or the light will go on based off the man door opening, which is controlled by a magnetic switch, which is mounted onto the door, which you can just barely see here. Magnetic switch mounted on the door, which controls the LED bar. So as soon as the door gets open to a certain point where that magnet gets far enough away from the control box, the LED light goes on. So again, showing that at a distance so you can kind of see what's going on. See the door closing, light goes off, door open, light goes on, off, on, off. So going back outside, there's that magnet. Nothing obtrusive. Looking at a Quaker 4x4 with the automatic door in it. I actually have 3 here today. Quakers don't come with wheels, but they are an option. I love the wheels, especially for the 4x4. Very easy to pull around. This is most recent load. Just fits on my trailer. This is our newest version of the Coop Concierge. If you were to buy this separately, not installed by me, you would get it in this shape with no holes for the wires And so if you need to put the holes in the wires, this video will show you how. First thing you need to do is take off the front panel by removing these 4 screws. Carefully pulling out the band cord on the side. Now you can see the main power supply, which we also need to remove, and you do that by removing the 4 screws on the rear, but keeping your hand up on the power supply so it doesn't drop down. Not losing the screws. Alright, now that we remove the 4 screws, the power supply comes out. So we just have our standard box with none of the ports drilled yet, which I'll show you how to mark and drill. A quick look at the main power supply unit. We have our 110 coming in, ground, neutral, and power. We have the lines going to the solar panel, and our standard is a shade of red is always positive, and then the other is negative or ground. So that goes to the solar panel. This goes to the battery. Again, red is positive. This drives the motor on the door itself, and this is the door sensor, so the interior light will go on and off with the opening and closing of the door. And last but not least is this power supply to the LED light bar. So if you were to wire this, you don't necessarily have to use the 110 because it will run totally off the solar panel and the battery, but you definitely will have to wire the motor. You don't have to have a door sensor, and you can use the lamp if you choose to use the lamp. So that is the main unit. Periodically we do a software upgrade, which would require upgrading the CPU. The CPU is actually on the front panel, so if you look at the front panel as it came off, we'll get to the CPU, which is just taking off these 4 screws. Now that we have the front panel off, you can see the actual CPU, and here we have written that it's most recently updated 4/4/2013 with version 7D, which version 7D is our current version. So all the capabilities with version 7D, I'll quickly go through them. Obviously it opens and closes the doors based off the solar lookup table, so you enter in your lat and long and it opens and closes the doors based off an offset from sunrise and sunset for that particular day. When closing, it has the sense down capability, which on the way down it's sensing the load on the motor, and if that load exceeds the threshold, it believes it's hitting obstruction and will reopen, and then it will close again. 10 minutes later, it'll open again, called the tardy chicken capability, which is to allow any tardy chickens to get into the coop. It also, when closing from tardy chicken, it will sense any kind of obstruction and open on the first closing. On the second closing, it drives closed, assuming you definitely want that door closed. Some of the other new capabilities added to the Coop Concierge for version 7D is low power indicator, which flashes the interior light if the power gets below a certain voltage, letting you know that either the sun hasn't been out long enough, or you haven't had it plugged in, or if you had snow covering the solar panel or something to that effect. And they're all the new upgrades for version 7D. For my standard installation, I need to put 6 holes into this junction box. On the top, I typically put my LED light, my power source, my solar panel, extra outlet, which is where I run my 110 out so that I can have an outlet on the opposite side of the door, the power to the door itself, and then on the bottom I put the line to the battery. If you were going to mount this away from the door, you would have to put a 7th hole, which would be for the door proximity sensor line. I typically put this so close to the door that the proximity sensor actually gets mounted inside the box, and the secondary magnet gets mounted on the door, and it can sense it through the wall of the junction box. First thing you need to do when drilling the holes is measuring and putting marks where you're going to drill the holes. One thing to keep in mind is you don't want your holes in front of the tabs for affixing this box to the wall. I've done this many times when I try and use the drill to put in the screws and the lines are in the way. It makes you very unhappy. So for the top side, I make it 1.5 inches deep, and I put a mark at 2 inches and 4 inches. There are the two top ones. Again, this is going to be the LED light, and this one's going to be the power supply. On the side of the box, I put 3 marks, and this is at 1.5 inches, 3 inch, and 4.5. Again, 1.5 inches back from the top. And on the bottom, this is for the battery. I put this one at, it should be 4.5. I actually marked it 4.25, so I need to make a new mark, 4.5. That one is for the battery. Again, on this side we have, top one goes to the solar panel, the middle one is the extra outlet, and the bottom one is actually the door itself. Then we'll go and drill these. Alright, so we're just about to drill the holes into the box, and we used a 7/8 inch paddle bit. Believe it or not, paddle bits work the best on this kind of material. I've used every other kind of bit and they all gum up or melt the plastic and make a nasty hole, but for this, the 7/8 inch one does the best job. And on the drill press makes it all that much easier. So we have our marks, and alright, easy enough. We'll do another one and show you how it's done. Finish the rest off. Alright, now that we have all our holes drilled for where our wires are going to pass out of the junction box, again, to go through them, LED light, power supply, solar panel, extra outlet, door, drive, and battery. Once we have that done, we're going to install our wire connectors. Actually, they're, I forget what they're called, some sort of wire grab thingamajigger. I'll think of a new name. Alright, so we're installing the remaining wire connectors, and this would be included if you had bought a separate Coop Concierge. I would include the wire connectors you need. Again, it's important that they're mounted 1.5 inches down so they don't obstruct the motherboard when it gets put on, and it's also important that they're drilled not directly in front of the mounting ears. I've done that, it's not fun. Oh, I needed a 6th one. Alright, we'll put that in. Alright, so here we have a junction box with all the connectors, strain relief core connectors they're actually called. Believe it or not, these things cost me like $2.50, so it starts to add up. Now again, this has 6 core connectors. You could possibly need a 7th if you were going to mount the proximity sensor somewhere away from this control junction box. Now that all the core connectors are in, all the holes are drilled, we can reassemble, which means gently putting the master power unit back in. Gently, gently. It's a little more difficult now. There's a lot of the obstructions, but we can do it. It does fit. Okay, and turn it over, line up the screw holes, and put back in the screws. Probably good. Okay, so again, now we have the power supply unit remounted, and it can look a little overwhelming because you have so many wires, but each wire just needs to be dealt with on its own. Obviously this is going to be driving the door again, so that's going to go out this hole. Actually, we're going to have a wire come in here and wire nut it. This unit is actually going to go to the battery, so that one actually comes out through this hole. This goes to the solar panel, so it's going to come out this hole. This is the power supply, which is going to come out this hole. And this one, for me, is an internal, this one goes to the LED light. And the last but not least is the internal sensor for the proximity sensor for the door. Alright, again, for illustration purposes, because you'd make all these connections within the junction box, I've routed each set of wires through their corresponding hole. This one powers the LED light. This would be AC power coming in. This is going to the solar panel. This one will eventually have an outlet coming out of it. I don't have that yet. This drives the door, yellow, blue. This goes to the battery, red, gray. And then this will be internal, which will get mounted to the side, which will be the proximity sensor, unless you're doing that externally. And this is the wire band that actually gets connected to the front panel. Let me show you that real quick, what the front panel connection is. So if you look, you'll see the wire band connector right there. And this gently gets inserted in, which will be hard to video, but I think you'll get the idea. Alright, does that make sense? Alright, now we'll run all our wires. Again, we have a fully wired power supply. This is the connector to the LED light bar. If you were to put the LED light bar further away, you could run a cord, a patch cord between the junction box and this connector, but the LED light actually connects right to this. A weather-tight seal is formed with a threaded nut that goes on here. This is going to the power supply, which you don't necessarily need, but it's very good to have 110 for the dead of winter when we might not be getting enough sun to run the unit. Here we have going to the solar panel, the additional outlet, the actual door itself, and then down to the battery. And then we also have the internal proximity sensor, which the other part of the proximity sensor gets mounted to the door, and this is the wire band that goes to the actual CPU front panel. And of course, I don't want to forget, you always want to have a fuse on the positive leg of your battery in case any kind of short circuits were to occur. Which you can see here, opens up and there's a typical car fuse in there. In this particular case, it's a 4 amp fuse we use. Alright, so I want to show how you actually use a strain relief and how they work. So in here is a rubber gasket that there's a tapered area there. Then when this gets tightened, it squeezes that gasket around the wire. So the strain relief is very loose. This wire has already been stripped. Push it through the strain relief. I like to get to the point where the insulation is just showing on the inside of the box. And then you tighten the strain relief. And now that cord is attached. For all my cords, I actually buy a 50-foot indoor-outdoor extension cord, and I cut off the plug end, the outlet end, to make it my extra outlet, I use the plug-in for my power supply, and then I use all that's left to run to the battery, to power the door, to go up to the solar panel, and for the lights I actually have a connector for that, but I use the entire 50 feet. Wire nutting is also very easy. You want to make sure your two wires are lined up to the same distance, stripped to the same amount. Take the wire nut, twist it on. Again, I'll show you that with the two greens. Turning clockwise to tighten the wire nut, and then the two whites. Again, lining them up, pinching with your two fingers. Believe it or not, this takes a while to learn how to do. It's very easy for me because I've done a lot of them. And there you go, wire nutted. So that's all you need to do. Again, this is my standard configuration. I went through all the steps of dismantling the unit, marking and drilling the holes, putting in the strain relief core connectors, and then showing you how you would then attach the wires. But this represents how I would orient it for my standard coop. If I had a door that was on the opposite side of the coop, I would have to shift all this to the other side. So each individual coop design, coop construction may require a different orientation of all these strain relief connectors. Coop Concierge, as it would come in a package. I have it laid out here so I can go through all the different parts. To the far left is the actual door itself. You see a wire going between it to the controller. Above the controller is another wire that would go to the solar panel. The wire coming out of the bottom actually goes to the battery backup that you stick in one of the nesting boxes. Below that is the LED 30-inch light bar. Next over is the GFI outlet that gets attached to the wall that you can power heat lamps or other power draws that you might have inside your coop. And all the way over to the right is the outside junction box. And I'll show you how this all goes together. Alrighty. Alright, so I have the Coop Concierge laid out in the chicken coop, and the first part you put in is the GFI outlet that you have to stick in through the wall to the outside. A 7/8 inch hole gets drilled just inside these two beams. The first thing you do to install the Coop Concierge is to push this through that hole. Alright, now back outside the coop, I've got the outside junction box with the extension cord. We pushed this wire in the previous video, pushed the conduit and wire through. Got to put a 90-degree bend on this wire and stick it through. Pulling all this wire through till where it gets into this junction. You want to pull it until you see the cover. Push it in there as tight as you can, and then rotate it around, most likely twice. And you will push this back through, and with the 7/8 inch hole, the conduit just fits perfectly in there to make it nice and sealed. Now, with the conduit connected, you want to attach the junction box to the coop. I love my hammer drill. Alright, next job is to connect the wires. We have the wires coming in from the inside, connecting here to the outside. With the ground, you'll have 3 wires to connect. You'll need a wire nut that can handle, that I actually included, that can handle 3 14-gauge wires. You attach those. There's green to the 2 coppers, so all the ground's together. The 2 whites get connected together. That's with a wire nut that can handle 2 14-gauge. And then the blacks get connected together. Again, with a wire nut that can handle 2 14-gauge. It takes a little bit of effort to get your fingers to do what you want with respect to connecting wire nuts. But you get there. You twist them a little bit so they fit nicely in there. And then next we put the cover on. Putting the covers on, it's pretty easy. Just line it up. Make sure that the gasket lines up. Phillips head driver. Gently drive it in. Not too tight, but tight enough that the gasket squeezes. make a watertight seal. Okay, so what we've completed is the outside junction with the extension cord. You can hardwire this, you can remove this wire and come in with conduit if you'd like. That's why there's a junction box on the outside, so you can choose how you want it connected. Alright, the next piece to install is actually the controller itself, which goes right tucked in nicely here. It's got to go up against the wall here, up against the beam, because there's going to be a proximity sensor put on the door so it knows when the door opens. So you just screw it, so right there. One more screw in up here. Okay, right, now we have the Coop controller fully installed. You can see coming back to the GFI, and then you can see where we had previously put this out through the wall. You take the GFI, right, I usually put it right there. Now we're going to screw that in. 2 screws quick. Try and make it nice and level so the customer's happy with how it looks. Okay. Alright, now that we've gotten the GFI outlet in place, we take a conduit bracket and we adhere this so that it's nice and straight. This is the only place that we have the power in conduit. It's the only place the chickens can access a cord that has 110 volts in it. Alright, so this is the chicken door area. Chicken door has to be packed out so that it's flat, so the door can be attached to a flat area. It must be flat, otherwise you can cock the door, torque the door so it won't open. So the door just gets set in place. You want to make sure it's centered. You want to make sure it's approximately level or plumb, which that is right about there. You take your driver and you drive in 4 screws right through the flange. Makes it very easy to install. And I'll just put 4 more in and we'll be done. Alright, so we have most of the major components installed. One of the last things to do is to straighten up the wires, and what we use are these cable stays, cable holders. So we take our wires, we organize them, and we put them nice and lined up where we want them, and we hammer these in. It's very easy to do. Hold it in place. Working our way along until we've gotten the wire nice and straight in place to where we want it. Putting them about every 18 inches. Alright, now that I've got most of the cables tacked into their final location, I have the light bar, which comes in a protective cover. Pull it out of that protective cover by removing these rubber stoppers and pulling out the light bar. And you can see that for this case, I've got the threaded end, so the light bar goes this way. The light bar will be put right about here. Try and make it level and make sure it has a connection. So there's included brackets that get used, and you just screw them in like you screwed in the other conduit holders, just like that. So after we ran the cable for the solar panel up to the ceiling, put a slight slit through the insulation right at the peak, and then shove the wire up through the peak so that it came out onto the roof, because of the ridge on the roof leaves a gap between the ribs of the metal roof. So that wire shoves through there, and you'll see it from the outside when we connect it to the solar panel. This gets attached to the solar panel. Black is positive, white is negative. Alright, so the solar panel works where we're going to screw through these two into the roof, and these two are going to go up underneath the eaves. So it only takes 2 screws to attach it. But the first thing you have to do is attach the wires. Red positive to black, because black is positive. This is the self-tapping screw that is used to drill through the metal roof and hold the solar panel in place. Alright, solar panel in place, centered on the roof, just 2 self-tapping screws. Alright, we've gotten to the time when it's to install the battery. If you come in and look, we're going to use the nesting box closest to the door where we've already run the wire down into. Now, as is typical for this nesting box, you'll see that it is the one that's typically chosen by the chickens, so there's a whole bunch of eggs in there. I need to clean that out. I'm going to block off that bay so that they can't use it, and we'll stick the battery in there. Making final connections on the battery. This comes in pre-installed, which is a surge protector, a fuse, in case something shorts in the battery connection. It really has more to do with in case someone puts the wires on backwards, it will burn that out first. We're just making this final connection. You see we clean the bay out. It's ready. Alright. That's it, buddy. So we're just putting the final blocking in to block off the bay so that the chickens don't play with the battery. Just a 2 1-foot pieces of 1x6 is what I use. And you see now that's all cordoned off. We can close up. Done with the battery. So you can see here the first bay is closed in. Alright, next is to attach the proximity sensor. First is this piece of PVC. It's attached to the door right here, up against the front, up to the top. We'll put 2 screws in, and then after we do that, I'll show you how to attach the actual proximity sensor onto the panel. Attaching the proximity sensor comes with 2-sided tape already attached. Take off the cover there. This arrow is supposed to be down. We take that, we put it right to the edge. Right to the edge. Right there. Squeeze it on. Alright, now it's time to attach the front panel onto the control panel. Take the ribbon, and there's a slot in there, which let me show you. The slot on the edge. And you put the ribbon into that slot. If I can do it. There we go. Alright. Should be good. Now the next thing we have to do is attach the proximity sensor inside, which you can't do until you're done because it needs to line up with this. So the proximity sensor was just attached to wires will eventually get adhered to the inside of the controller. But what you got to do is you got to line it up to where the door proximity sensor lines up. And you open and close the door to make sure that they sense each other's location. And you can see that right here I'm getting that. So now I'll take the tape off. If I can get it. Come on. There we go. And again, I'll take this and I'll line it up. Before I permanently affix it, I want to make sure that it's lined up with the other sensor. Right about there. Alright, so now that's affixed. Now that that's done, we can actually take the panel up. And the lamp should work. Lamp works. Open the door, lamp goes on. 4 screws into this panel, and we'll be done. Now the system is fully installed and the door is open, I can come in and I can push close. At what time the door will close. It goes down. Now that it's closed, if I wanted to manually override and go to open, I just push open. Now, once it's open or once it's closed, the program will go back into normal, where it'll open or close based off the normal program after that. This is my friend, the rooster. This rooster is not liked by the other rooster, so he has to jump out every morning, and every night I have to go catch him, because otherwise the fox will catch him.